Welcome to The Explainer. Look, we all know Ireland leans heavily on the States, but the actual scale of it, lads, it would absolutely make your eyes water. Let's get straight to the data. Right, take a look at this. This massive chunk right here is the US. It's the absolute guts of our economic success. We hear constantly about how mighty the Irish economy is doing, the strong growth, the high employment, but underneath it all, we aren't just slightly dependent on the States, we're overwhelmingly dependent. Now, what's really fascinating here is how our whole economy is essentially propped up by these three pillars, and a massive proportion of all three comes straight across the Atlantic. I mean, US companies operate at a colossal scale here. They employ hundreds of thousands of us, they generate staggering tax revenue, and they drive a massive chunk of our day-to-day economic activity. But here's the catch, right? Big dependence equals big risk. Now, this setup has obviously brought brilliant benefits, fantastic jobs, and serious cash into the country. But relying this heavily on a single source, it leaves us incredibly exposed. Our day-to-day economic performance is intimately tied to decisions made in boardrooms and political offices thousands of miles away. It basically boils down to this. When policy changes in the US, Ireland doesn't just observe it on the 6-1 news. We actually feel it. Whether it's a new administration under Donald Trump or whoever happens to be in the White House, a change in their domestic rules isn't just foreign affairs to us. It's an immediate knock-on effect right here. If they change direction, the ripples hit our shores, and fast. So the crucial point is this really stark divide. On one side, you have the agile multinational. These boardrooms can literally shift global investments overnight based on a regulatory tweak or a tax incentive in Washington. But on the other side, you have the rooted Irish family. We're tied to our local jobs, the local schools, the local services. We can't just up and move our lives when a tax policy changes. So when the boardroom pivots, it's the working Irish family that's left feeling the pinch. Let's break down exactly how that pinch happens. It starts with a US policy change. Say they make it way more attractive for companies to build back home. That shifts corporate growth. A tech giant decides its next big expansion will be in Texas instead of, say, Dublin or Cork. That instantly drops our tax revenue, which eventually hits local jobs. So the corporate jargon of a domestic focus over in America quickly translates into hiring freezes down your local high street. And that brings us to a massive point. Growth shifts first. Look, we're not saying these companies are going to pack up and leave Ireland tomorrow. That's a total misconception. They aren't going to just shut down their massive operations in Galway or Kildare overnight. But what they will do is funnel their new roles, their future expansions, and their fresh investments back across the Atlantic. The tap of new opportunities, it just gets turned off. And this brilliantly illustrates our next vulnerability. We are an export-driven economy. That means our growth relies completely on global trade conditions. If U.S. policies spark trade rows, or if America becomes more inward-looking, our export-heavy economy takes a direct local hit. The factories and the tech hubs here rely absolutely on selling to the rest of the world. Now, have a think about the reality of our national wallet. A staggering 75% of our corporate tax revenue comes from a relatively small number of large U.S. companies. Just a handful of massive tech and pharma giants are effectively funding the government coffers. And remember, that's the money that pays for our hospitals, builds our housing, and keeps our schools running. Which leads us to a slightly grim reality. When revenue shifts, government decisions follow. If U.S. policy changes where these massive multinationals operate or record their profits, that tax revenue dries up. And if they pay less tax here, it means an immediate squeeze on public spending. Literally, less money for nurses, teachers, and filling up the potholes. And let me tell you, timing is absolutely everything here. See how this builds? Global companies move like lightning, meaning investment decisions change immediately. The markets react in months, but the actual policies in Washington might take years to be fully implemented. This means the squeeze on our economy happens way before the actual laws are fully inked into the books. Let's bring it right down to the micro level, to the kitchen table. These high-level transatlantic shifts directly dictate a working family's ability to pay the bills. When investment shifts, it means fewer job opportunities for the young ones coming out of college. When national revenue drops, income growth stalls, meaning you aren't getting that raise you desperately need to keep up with the weekly shop. And when trade changes, the cost of living goes up. It is literally that direct. But look, let's keep it fair. Dependency does not automatically mean weakness. Fair play to us, Ireland built a highly successful, globally envied economic model over the last few decades. It's brought incredible wealth and totally transformed the country. But, all models have trade-offs, and our inevitable trade-off is this intense exposure to global shifts.
So, from a practical standpoint, what can you actually do with this information? First, recognize the connection. Just know that what happens in the US matters deeply here. Second, understand that global policy equals local outcomes. Read between the lines of global news to anticipate impacts on your own community. And third, pay attention to broader trends. They very often signal changes to the Irish job market long before they become visible to everyone else.
To sum it all up, it's a double-edged sword. Global integration brings us really strong growth, but relying so heavily on external inputs brings amplified vulnerability. It's a dynamic we've seen throughout economic history. Systems built on external reliance bring great wealth, for sure, but they amplify every single shockwave from abroad. When major economies shift direction, Ireland moves right along with them. Which leaves us with this final, absolutely crucial question. What happens when the cost of living spikes next? If these external shifts can squeeze our economies so fast, how will they inflate local prices for the average working family before we even see it coming? We're going to tackle exactly that in our next explainer. Thanks a million for joining me, and I'll catch you then.